Congratulations on reaching the end of this second week in this course on preparing data for analysis with Microsoft Excel. This week, you explored how to create and work with formulas and functions in Excel. Let's take a few minutes to recap what you learned in this week's lessons. You began the first lesson by learning about formulas. You learned that a formula in Excel is a calculation performed on the values in a range of cells in your worksheets. Examples of these calculations include addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Once a calculation is completed, the formula returns a result, even if it is an error. You then learned how formulas work. Different characters or operators are used to indicate what type of calculation Excel should perform. Examples of operators and calculations include addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. The formula bar shows the formula in the cell you are working in, while the worksheet shows the result of the formula in the formula bar. Formulas can also be static or dynamic. A static formula means that the numbers are fixed, so it always generates the same results. A dynamic formula is one in which the results depend on the current values in the referenced cells. A formula can also include a reference to a cell that itself contains a formula, creating a chain of calculations. And a formula can also refer to a cell in another sheet. This reference must include the worksheet name followed by an exclamation mark. You then learned how to control calculations. You learned that when working through a formula, Excel handles the operators according to the order of precedence. This means that Excel calculates formulas according to the hierarchical position of each symbol within the order of precedence. The hierarchy is as follows. Excel first calculates division and multiplication operators. It then calculates addition and subtraction operators. However, you also discovered that you could control a calculation using parentheses in formulas. Parentheses instruct Excel as to which part of a calculation must be executed first, even if this would contradict the order of precedence. There are also times when you may need to reproduce cell entries and formulas within a worksheet. When a formula is copied, it is important to consider the appearance of the cell references. There are two ways that a cell reference can appear in a calculation: relative and absolute. A relative cell reference means that Excel adjusts the cell reference of a copied formula relative to its new location to make sure it's correct. And an absolute reference means that Excel keeps the reference constant. It doesn't adjust it. You learned that to make a cell reference absolute, you must add a $sign before the column initial and before the row number. You also explored different percentage calculations, and you learned how to create reliable percentage formulas using the correct syntax. Throughout the lesson, you put your new knowledge to use by assisting AdventureWorks with many different calculation tasks. One of these tasks was in the exercise. In the exercise, you calculated AdventureWorks' profits and margins in preparation for a presentation. To complete this task, you created a calculation that relied on the company's revenue data, and you made sure that your calculation followed the best practices you had explored during the lesson. You then undertook a knowledge check. In this item, you proved your understanding of the concepts you encountered by answering a series of questions. Finally, you explored a list of additional resources designed to help you improve your knowledge of the topics in this lesson. In the second lesson of this week, you learned how to get started with functions. You began by learning that a function is a predefined formula that performs a calculation based on values specified by the user. You then discovered that Excel contains many built-in functions grouped into separate categories, which can be accessed from the Formulas tab or ribbon. You then explored the two elements of a function. The first element of a function is the name, such as sum. Next is the arguments. An argument is the data a function accepts. Arguments are mandatory, but the data can be custom. You then learned how to construct an argument in Excel. Like any other calculation, a function formula begins with an equal sign. You then need to write the function name, for example, equals followed by sum. The next step is to write the arguments within a pair of parentheses. When you've finished typing your arguments, end your function formula with a closing parentheses. You also learned that you could create a function using the Insert Function tool. The tool is a framework for building functions. It's accessed using the Formulas ribbon or from the worksheet screen. The tool lets you build a function from a series of drop-down lists, and it provides useful tips for building functions and warnings for when they're incorrect. You then explored the AutoSum shortcut. The AutoSum shortcut is a method of adding formulas in Excel. It provides quick access to core functions that Excel users make daily use of. The functions it provides access to include the sum function, which adds all values within a selected range of cells, the average function, used to calculate the average of the selected range, and the different versions of the count functions. These are useful methods of counting the numbers of cells in a given range that contain or don't contain specified values. There's also the max function, which displays the cell with the largest value from a given range. And finally, the min function. This function displays the cell with the lowest value from a given range. You can also reproduce calculations quickly and easily in a worksheet using the autofill feature. Just like in the previous lesson, you put your new knowledge to use by assisting AdventureWorks with many different functions. This included the exercise item. In the exercise, you helped AdventureWorks to prepare a monthly sales report. To complete this task, you prepared the report using a series of functions, and you made sure that your calculation followed the best practices you had explored during the lesson. You then undertook a knowledge check and a module quiz in which you proved your understanding of the concepts you encountered by answering a series of questions. You've now reached the end of this module summary. It's time to move on to the discussion prompt, where you can discuss what you've learned with your peers. You'll then be invited to explore some additional resources to help you develop a deeper understanding of the topics in this lesson. Best of luck. We'll meet again during next week's lessons.